Hello everybody, and welcome back to the Shadow of the Colossus playthrough. We are over halfway there at this point in taking down all of these Colossi. We're on to Colossi 9 of 16. And yeah, this is not one of my favourites. It's found in the land where trees ne'er grow. It sleeps in a dry lake bed, a rude awakening. And yeah, it's it's definitely not a favourite, and I am pretty I very much agree with the general consensus that this one is probably the most disliked of all the Colossi, and it's because it can attack from a great distance, and also it's very finicky to actually get it to be weakened, or to the point where you can start climbing it. Once you can climb it, it's a pretty easy fight in the grand scheme of things. But it's just a faff. And, I mean, you can probably always tell when you get to a sort of... You've probably gathered my Shadow of the Colossus part lengths by now, in terms of what may or may not happen during them. If it's quite short, then it's quite clear that I'm going straight for the Colossi, and I'm pretty much going to be okay in terms of taking it down. So when it's like 10 to 15 minutes, you're pretty sure, yeah, this is going to be a nice simple one. The second you get over 20 minutes, then it's just like, well, you either found the Colossi quite quickly and then struggled for a bit, or you faffed about in the Forbidden Lands for a while, finding safe shrines and killing white lizards and finding life fruits, or you spent a bit of time doing that and then spent a very long time taking on a Colossi. In this instance, considering this Colossi is easily probably the most disliked of all the Colossi in the game, yeah, you can probably tell exactly how this one is going to go down. And you can see here that I'm... Hey, there's hanging off the side. It's quite fun pulling that one off. But yeah, the hilarious thing is that this is one of the longest Colossi fights, or one of the longest parts that I'm going to have to deal with in this playthrough. I mean, heck, even Phaedra took much shorter amount of time than this. But yeah, my longest parts, Hydrus, obviously that was because I spent a lot of time faffing about in the overworld. This, which is a bit of time faffing about in the overworld, a lot of time faffing about taking the damn thing on, and then the next Colossi takes up a fair amount of time as well, and that's because I struggled to find the Blighter, and then I'll let you know the rest of it when we get there. But then the rest of the Colossi, not too bad. The longest part obviously is going to be the finale. Obviously, most finales are quite lengthy in general. It tends to be their thing. Pretty much every playthrough that I've seen as of late. Very long opening parts, very long closing parts. I too follow this pattern because it's kind of the most obvious one to take. Because, I mean, it just makes sense. Because you want to get people to kind of properly experience the game on the first part and like get really into it. And if you do a kind of long first part, then people have got enough to sink their teeth into to see whether they are going to end up fully enjoying the playthrough. And then obviously when you get to the finale, it's all about you've gotten this far, you're going to sit around for a pretty lengthy finale. Because you want to see how it ends, and it's that whole you've put in the time commitment and therefore you're going to stick with it no matter bloody what. Especially if you struck out a very long playthrough in the grand scheme of things. I mean, the other thing is that most people, I mean, you can see this by general YouTube viewing figures. Part 1 and the finale parts of every playthrough tend to have the highest of any of the parts. Part of that is because most people look for game openings and game endings. I'm not quite sure why. I suppose part of it, I mean, I get game openings because it's the whole thing of you want to see how it begins and just get a feel for the way a game works. But then, I don't know necessarily why you go for the game ending other than perhaps you weren't able to beat the game and therefore you are going for the just to see what happens. I'm not really entirely sure, but hey, it is the way it is. And oh, I see you. You little blighter. Take that. I'm very glad that Wanda can survive jumps from that height, because I mean he'd be pretty screwed if he couldn't. But it does make this a lot less painful, and also because, you know, we can just heal immediately afterwards, so that's all good. Yeah, I feel one of the things that I should probably bring up as we return to our hunt for the next Colossi, and that is that one of the things that you may have noticed, may not have noticed, is that as we progress through the game, Wanda is getting gradually more and more corrupted. It began as a sort of blackness in his veins. You can see it sort of more in his legs of what's visible, and you can sort of see it in his arms as well. There's just a bit of darkness there, and as you kill more and more Colossi, that's going to get more and more pronounced as we go. It's definitely something that is a lot more noticeable in the original game. It's ridiculously more noticeable. And I mean, that's one of the things that a lot of people did end up criticising in the remake, is that those changes are much more subtle. From what I can tell, sort of the main point at which it became notable in the original was just after the 8th Colossus, so the one that we just defeated, which was Kuramori. And take that, you stupid lizard. So yes, you can very much see it in the original. Here it is, as I said, much more subtle. His skin becomes paler, his hair becomes darker. And just in general, you can see he's not doing all that well as our Wanda right now. I mean, I think you can also see on his clothing, it's become a bit dirtier and all that jazz. The thing is that despite the fact that it's a lot less visually clear in this version, it's going to pay off in the long run. But yes, this right here is the site of our next battle. And oh god. Yeah, as I said, not a fan. Most people aren't. And I mean, also, it's going to be a rather frustrating one for me in terms of, you know, the thing that I really like to do, that I have been doing throughout this playthrough. Of all my stuff to do with names, because I love names, and etymology, and all that side of things. And this one's just a nightmare, really. So, you can come at this arena from two ways, but it is in that arena with the geysers. Plain and simple. So, yeah, the trick is that you've got to head over towards one of the walls, and that will trigger the next Colossi to come out to play. This is Bassaran. As he rises up out of his cavern, you get a violent encounter, and it really is a violent encounter. You are going to need to be on aggro for the entirety of this if you can help it, because there is no way that you're going to be able to avoid his attacks otherwise. He's a very violent Colossi, and, as I said, very frustrating to defeat. Once we eventually manage to get on top of him, we will get revived power. Beautiful. But yes, it's the first of three Colossi that definitely requires aggro to defeat. All the others you can hurt without aggro. Aggro helps, but it's very likely that Bassaran will hurt aggro in this one. And yeah, as I said, it's easily one of the most disliked of all the Colossi, because the whole gist of the fight is that you've got to get Bassaran over one of these geysers, and that will then push Bassaran up, dislodge him a little bit, and then you've got to kind of knock him over, which point you can then grab on. And you've got to be sort of very specific on where he is above that geyser for it to work properly. And that's where the issue comes in, because often Bassaran will walk further than you intend him to, and he's just generally a bit of a nightmare. There's also the fact of obviously he can attack from such a long distance away, and if you end up not on aggro, then you are basically buggered. So yeah, he's a pretty nasty one in the grand scheme of things. And yeah, the whole thing that gets me frustrated also with his name is that it's very difficult to actually find anything. So the origin for Bassaran most likely seems to be Turkish, and it's most definitely a surname. I mean, it also seems to be a Spanish word, but there's no actual place that gives a proper etymology of Bassaran, which is really frustrating. There's an indication that it might be based on the word basar, which means to base, as Bassaran is a third person plural of basar, and the whole to base thing might be referencing it being so heavy. Not 100% sure. And I mean, I suppose it could sort of make sense of the whole base thing, because it's a turtle. I mean, its developer name was the Turtle. But yes, its Latin name's pretty strange, because it's Nimbus Recanto, which doesn't properly translate really, because it sort of seems to be the rainstorm recants, but it's not quite accurate, because Nimbus means storm or cloud, and the Recanto means I echo, so it either means storm I echo or something along those lines. It's very fragmented Latin. I say as obviously an expert of the Latin language. I mean, I suppose I don't quite know why it's called after a cloud. I suppose because you've got perhaps the steam coming from the geysers, that might be part of it. And also, part of me is wondering whether there's some inspiration in perhaps the name of some sort of legendary turtle in anything really, and it's not looking necessarily likely. Because I mean, the thing that I would have perhaps gone for would have been the Kappa or Koopa, which is obviously what Bowser is based off of, but they went with the Turkish word. So perhaps something to do with turtles and Turkey? Yeah, no, it's not looking likely. Anyway, I also had a lot of faff with Bassaran because I seem to glitch out on him more so than I feel any of the other Colossi. Because what ended up happening actually quite a few times, it was really infuriating, was that I'd be able to get onto the side but then not quite high enough, and I'd just end up dangling from one hand, not actually being able to jump up and do anything. And it was just an incredibly aggravating fight. I mean, we're a good 5-6 minutes in now, and I have made no progress other than getting him kind of properly tipped at once. And at this moment, it's just like, you're on top of the bloody geyser. Fall over. Thankfully, he did then fall over, which was quite nice. But the annoying thing is that you have got such a short amount of time in which to get your attacks in, and you're just like... The entire thing is just a rather frustrating experience, and one that I really don't want to replicate ever again, really. And it's annoying because I really like pretty much all of the other Colossi apart from Bassaran, the next one, and yeah, those are probably my two least favourite of all of the Colossi. I mean, I suppose I'm not too fond of Phaedra, but yeah, Phaedra, this one, next one, and then maybe the final Colossi. I'm not overly fond of that one either, but that's all for very different reasons. At this point, I just want to get on top of bloomin' asshole Bassaran. I mean, part of me wonders whether the whole issue was that I just needed to wait here and then leap my way up after that. But then I'm not 100% sure, because it's just like, I get to this point, I'm just like, but why can't I get that second grab on? Maybe it's because I have my sword out? I don't know, but there's just like, there's no reason I shouldn't be able to grab onto that, and then I just end up falling and I have to do it all over again. If I actually manage to get up on top of Bassaran, he's not that difficult. Because once you're on top of him, you can just blitz the fight. It's just getting him to stand over a geyser and then actually getting up on top of him. I don't know whether I was just failing miserably here, like I was doing something wrong, or whether I was experiencing like a sort of glitch of some description. But either way, it just was not going well for me as a fight in the grand scheme of things. And it really did just make this a really unpleasant fight in the grand scheme of things, and yeah. That's pretty much my reaction to Bassaran in the grand scheme of things. I've said that many times now in this part already. But in the grand scheme of things, obviously, I just don't like this guy. And really, he can just go to hell. But I think that we are very close to actually getting on top of the Blighter and taking him down. Because I'm looking at my timestamp and I'm just going, come on, you're nearly there. It just once again, map of getting him on top of a bloody geyser. Bassaran brings out the worst in me. He really does. I think the other thing that frustrated me is that, I mean, Dorman hasn't said anything in a while, but obviously kind of towards the start he kept saying this is how you're meant to defeat him, blah. You can turn those off, but it's just like, Dorman, I know how I'm meant to defeat him. He's just not behaving. Thank you very much. And getting him to behave so I can kill him, it's easier said than done. But I think... Hey! Fingers crossed, this is it. There we go. Oh no, not quite yet. Oh no, there we go. Right, come on Bassaran. You are going to die. This time is the end. And if you don't die, then seriously I'm going to cry a lot. Because yeah, I cannot be here for another 10-15 minutes taking you down, because it just would not be happening. But yeah, it was at this point where I was just going, oh god, oh god, oh god, not again, not again, not again! But thankfully, Wanda decided that he was going to cling on for long enough to get me through this. And then as soon as you're on him, it's just a case of running up his spine. And he can potentially throw you off, because there's not really anywhere to grab on his back. But really he's not too difficult to get along, and then as soon as you get to his head, it's stabby stabby time. This one is for all the time that you've wasted. This one is for Mono. This one is for all the pain you've caused aggro this fight. This one is because I can't be doing it with you anymore. And this one is because this needs to end now. So long, Bassaran. Thank God I'm never going to see you again. Goodbye.